What's up, y'all, and welcome to another great episode of the All Net Podcast with MIC LOGIK and I.DEAL. This is episode 5. We got plenty of bubble talk, I.DEAL. We're going to be going over the standings in the Western and Eastern Conference. There's been a lot of movement. I'm going to give you a bunch of young players that you should be watching that might be under your radar, and there's definitely one in particular now that I'm sure if you're a basketball fan of any kind that you know his name by now. And we're going to get into that as the show progresses. But as always, the All Net Podcast would not be possible without its partners, Shot Native Entertainment,
Shot Native, baby,
and the good people at True Chicago Sports Fans. Episode 5 is sponsored by Malcolm X Pictures. That's Mex, not X, Pictures. So check out Shake Bag and the Six. It's available on Prime Video now. The movie takes place on the north side of Chicago in Logan Square, 4 days after the legendary music producer Harvey Allbangers passes away. The camera follows local rapper Aztec De Niro as he and his colleagues show their initial reaction in this reenactment documentary film about the loss of Harvey Allbangers and his influence in the Chicago music scene, written by Los Duran. So shout out Aztec De Niro. You can follow him on IG, AZTECDINERO. And as always, we have another great producer in the spotlight this week. He goes by the name of DNA BEATZ. Incredibly talented producer. You can follow him on IG at DNA BEATZ. That's Beats with a Z at the end. And before we start talking about the standings, I just gotta mention, once again, I.DEAL, the level of competitive play that we've seen has been tremendous.
Yeah, there's not been any easing in the games, and I guess this would be one of the main reasons why you would never risk a Kevin Durant coming back, because there's not a chance for him to, smoothly, ease his way back into competition. It's been fiercely contested. Yeah, everything has been contested. I mean, you take a jab step. I mean, heck, even the Rockets are playing defense.
It's reminded me of March Madness almost, because every team besides the Washington Wizards are really fighting for a playoff spot right now. And we'll get into the Washington.
I'm enjoying the basketball so far. It's been, like you said, highly competitive, and I'm all here for it. And it's nothing better than seeing the best of the best that are highly invested into actually going at each other.
Yeah, and think about how many games have gone into overtime or double overtime and have come down to the wire on a last-second shot. It's just been awesome to watch. As a basketball fan, I could not be happier with the play that I'm seeing. Oh, I got something I want to bring up before we go into the standings, because I just saw it the other day. Let's talk about the Chicago Bulls for a quick second. So there's a report by Joe Colley that Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley might be thinking about trading away Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen and signing 2 max free agents in 2021. What do you think about that?
I love it. Giannis, you can come here.
Giannis!
And bring AD with you.
Bring AD. I also like the idea of maybe Victor Oladipo.
I don't mind that.
DeMar DeRozan's going to be out there.
He doesn't interest me as much as I think Oladipo would.
And for someone of his age, because he's in his 30s now.
Oh, yeah.
He needs to go to a contender. He doesn't need to go to... The Bulls are in a rebuilding mode, so...
What about little Dame Lillard? Is there any way to pry him out of Portland?
The reports are that if Dame goes anywhere, he's going to want to go to LA. The Lakers, not the Clippers. Definitely not the Clippers after we saw last night.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and whiteboard that for everybody?
So, the Clippers and Portland Trailblazers had an awesome game yesterday. And it came down to Dame Lillard missing 2 clutch free throws at the end of the game.
He only needed to hit 1 to tie it.
Yeah, there was like 18 seconds left. Clippers were up 117 to 116. Actually, 118 to 117, I believe. And Damian Lillard misses both. And I don't question Damian Lillard's clutch gene, because he showed it.
Come on, Skip.
He showed his clutch gene.
Skip is definitely not a Dame Lillard fan.
But Dame Lillard has knocked out Paul George in the playoffs. He did it last year on a 37-foot three-point shot to end the game in the series. And then he knocked out the Rockets in 2014, which Pat Beverly was on that team. So Pat Beverly and Paul George have some already bad feelings towards Dame Lillard. And Dame Lillard's not one to back down when people are talking crap to him. And Pat Beverly and Paul George are poking fun at him on a SportsCenter IG post. And of course, Dame Lillard fired shots back saying, hey, Paul, why don't you stop running away when things get tough? And,
Facts.
so
That's the one thing I will give Dame is the fact that he probably had opportunities to go anywhere else, but he's chosen to stay where he's at and be the man as opposed to following the culture that is the NBA and teaming up with other players.
Damian Lillard is an amazing player, too. He's one of my favorite guards to watch.
But then there was more after this, you were telling me, after this
I just
back
seen
and
this
forth.
today. So for everybody listening, me and I.DEAL are recording this Sunday morning. It's August 9th. And I saw that Paul George's girlfriend was firing shots at Damian Lillard's sister, calling her a cow because Damian Lillard's sister called Paul George a stripper.
I love
So
it.
it's getting really heated. I can't wait for when the Clippers and the Trailblazers face off again, because that's going to be a lot of fun. But let's get into bubble talk. Let's get into further bubble talk. I'm going to do the standings with you, and I'm going to give you the overall standings of the team and what they're doing in the bubble, so you guys have some context. And we're going to talk about, can you guess who first? Well, we're going into order. That was a layup. I gave you that one.
Yeah, I'm surprised you came up for air.
So the Lakers have had a little bit of a rocky start.
Trash.
They've gone 2-4 in the bubble. They're overall 51-18. But let's remember one thing. They've already clinched the West. They have the number 1 seed. They can coast if they choose to, which they seem to be doing. They can coast into the playoffs. So
Yeah, but there's something that has to be said to peaking at the right time, and you don't want to be going into the playoffs on a downswing.
that's a great point. Usually when you're gearing up for the playoffs, you're trying to play your best basketball so you can take that momentum and transfer it into the playoffs. And the Lakers have not done that so far. Everything looked fine on opening night of the restart on July 30th when they beat the Clippers 103-101. AD went off with 34 points. He went 8 of 19. Now the King James, I should say LeBron, he didn't look very majestic that night. I felt like he was very passive on offense, and he didn't look like the MVP candidate that we've been used to this
But
season.
that's your LeBron. He's always been that. He's too passive.
I don't know why he was passing up open shots and then he was taking bad shots, and he's not shot good.
It's because they're totally out of whack. There are 22 teams in the NBA's bubble. Of those 22 teams, the Lakers have the second best record in the NBA, but they rank last in field goal percentage,
Thank you.
last in three-point percentage, last in points per game, and next to last in free throw percentage.
So they beat the Clippers, then they go on to play Toronto, and they get absolutely demolished by Toronto, 107-92. LeBron had 20 points, and this is the thing. AD only had 14 points. AD can't have 14. He can't have games under 20 points per game, because who else besides LeBron, AD, and Kuzma are going to get you baskets on that team at a high level?
And I wouldn't even put Kuzma in there. He's like that extra topping that, if you get more than 10, 15 from him, you're having a good game.
I think you can rely on Kuzma if you really need to, and he's locked in to get you 15 to 16 a game.
Let me ask you this. I want to give you a stat line out there, people, and you're listening to the All Net podcast with MIC LOGIK and I.DEAL. I'm I.DEAL, the co-host. If I told you in 4 games this individual is averaging 19.3 points, 10 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 42% shooting, and 27% from the three-point range, is that your MVP?
I mean, I like those numbers. No.
Why don't you throw a cape on too while you're doing that? Put it under your knees.
For many players in the league, those are really good numbers, minus the shooting percentage.
Those ain't GOAT numbers.
That's the problem I'm having. Those are not GOAT numbers, and he hasn't looked engaged in a lot of these games that I've watched him. So they lost to Toronto. They got their asses kicked. They went on to play Utah. They won versus Utah. That's a tough Jazz team too. And Davis, he came back to his form. He scored about 42. So he went from 14 to 42. And then the next game, they play OKC, and they get bushwhacked 105-86. LeBron had 19. Davis had 9 points. How do you do that? How do you go from 14, 42 to 9 when you're the guy who has to carry this offensive load? I don't understand. Anthony Davis is a top 5 player in the league. He cannot be doing this.
I would agree with you talent-wise that Anthony Davis is one of the more talented players in the league. But I think sometimes he falls a little too much in love
With that 3-point shot?
Yes, and he shoots it well in context
enough, yeah.
for a big man. but he doesn't shoot it well enough. There are other more skilled big men from shooting it outside that are more dangerous than AD. I think he needs to go and drop down in the post and insert his presence down there instead of drifting and floating and popping these threes that he loves to take so much.
So while we're talking about AD, he played the Pacers yesterday. 8 points. There are so many ways for someone of Anthony Davis's size and skill level to score points. You're telling you can get 8 points off just offensive rebounds and putting it in. You're that tall, you're that skilled. How do you score 8 points against the Pacers? Miles Turner's that big of a challenge for you?
If you're a top level superstar in this league and you say AD's a top 5 guy, you should get to the free throw line alone almost double digits, 8-9 times.
He's finesse.
You should shoot 8 to 10 free throws.
He's a finesse big man. He is not a grinder down in the post.
And this is where I think they're gonna find out when they get into the actual playoffs and somebody goes down there and they want to beat them up.
So the question has been, are the Lakers in trouble? What do you think?
I don't like what I see from the Lakers. They look like they're discombobulated offensively. They have no identity on that end. And the worst part about it, they can't shoot. They couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat right now.
And that's another thing about the shooting. We've already talked about how they're last in the bubble as far as offensive percentage or offensive ranking. Besides LeBron, AD, Kuzma, nobody else is scoring for this squad. You get Waiters who will give you like 11 or 12. Caruso will give you like 7 points, 8 points maybe. Can't hit a 3-point shot to save his life.
And then the other issue that they're going to have moving forward is the simple fact that I don't think they have any wing defenders.
They're missing Avery Bradley. Their deficiencies are so clear now for everybody to see. Avery Bradley gave them a strong defensive presence and somebody who can knock down a 3-point shot, because last time they played the Clippers before the shutdown, Avery Bradley had 24 points. And he was a big reason that they beat the Clippers. If you're not getting production from Caruso, you're not getting it from Green, you're not getting it from Waiters, where's it coming from? Now, I was happy to see that Quinn Cook, he had a really good game. He was the only other Laker off the bench who's given a really strong offensive output. He had 21 yesterday against the Pacers. And I'm happy to see the hometown kid, Talen Horton-Tucker, had 10. He's been getting more playing time. But they miss Rondo and they miss Bradley. And right now, if you ask me, yes, I think the Lakers are in trouble. But I do think LeBron and AD can turn the switch on and they can win the title. So I'm still sticking with them as winning the championship.
Nah, that ain't happening. You don't know basketball, Mike.
Not at all.
None at all.
I don't know basketball.
You want to put a couple cases of Mountain Dew on this, Mike?
We could put some Dew on it. I put 3 cases of Dew on it. You gonna match that?
Yeah, Skip.
All right. Moving on to the number 2 seeded team right now. It's the Los Angeles Clippers. 47-22, 3-2 in the bubble. Keep in mind they have no Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, Lapdance Lou, Lemon Pepper Wings Lou, whatever you want to call him, had to miss a few games due to a not so well-made decision by him to visit Magic City.
Hey man, if you ever had the wings, you know it was worth the trip. And coronavirus be damned.
Now they were in a race to the second, or well, they were trying to keep second place. The Nuggets are really on their tail, but Kawhi and Paul George are playing really well. They're shooting the ball excellent. They're getting good play from their big man Zubac. Remember Zubac when he was on the Lakers? I was like, why did you guys trade this dude? He's a hooper.
Yeah, he's an NBA player. He's a contributing NBA player. There's plenty of guys that are just on the roster doing nothing, but he certainly has some ability.
Landry Shamet had a good game against the Pacers yesterday. They're so deep. Their worry right now is who's going to make their 7 to 8 man rotation in the playoffs. That's how much depth they have. Reggie Jackson might not make the 7 to 8 man rotation, because once they get Pat Beverly back and they have Lou Williams there, Reggie Jackson might be the man out, and he had a strong game as well.
Well, it all depends on what shoes Pat Beverly has on. If he's got his all black Air Force Ones, I'm sure he's ready to go.
They beat the Pelicans, lost to the Suns, which everybody's losing to the Suns. They beat Dallas, beat Portland, like we were talking about. I think the Clippers have a nice bit of momentum going, and I can understand due to their depth and their star power why people would favor them to win the championship this year.
We'll see. I mean, they certainly have the firepower to go ahead and match up with the best of the best in the West. And if I was taking them versus the Lakers, I think I'm going to swing more towards the Clippers. They just have more balanced offensive attack, whereas I think the Lakers are more top-heavy, dependent on their bigger stars.
So next we got the Nuggets in the number 3 spot. They're 45-24, 3-2 in the bubble. Keep in mind they've been without Jamal Murray for a bunch of games, Will Barton and Gary Harris. They lost to Miami. They beat OKC. That's where Michael Porter Jr. had a game. 37 points, 12 rebounds. And then the game after that, they won against the Spurs. Porter had 30 points and 15 rebounds on 58% shooting. This is a guy who fell in the draft because he had a back injury. He went 14th overall. Was it in 2018?
It was, yeah.
I would have loved Michael Porter Jr. to be on the Bulls bench for a few years until he was healthy, because this kid is a stud. He's going to be a star. He is one of those players who is under a lot of people's radars.
He was not under anybody's radars. If you recall, on draft night, I was yelling at the TV that the Bulls were stupid once again and not taking the 7th pick overall and using it on Michael Porter Jr. Instead, they spent it on Wendell Carter Jr., who has a clear, definitive ceiling. He's never going to get higher than this ceiling. And once he obtains it, that's great. He also has a very clear, definitive floor. And that's fine, because you know what you're kind of going to get from him.
He's like a 12 point.
He's like
rebound.
He's like a 10 point.
He's a low double.
Yeah,
player.
But you can
He's
find.
a guy.
He's a guy. He's a piece. And Michael Porter Jr. could have been actually one of the better players. Coming out of college, he was going to be a top 5 pick. Everybody knew it. He was probably in line to be the number 1 overall pick. Unfortunately, he had one of the worst injuries you can have. I've always been a proponent of saying never drafting anyone that's injured, because, that's already like getting a car. You go buy a used car that's already been in an accident. Once the car's in an accident, it's never going to be the same again. There's always something going wrong with it. And, that remains to be seen with Michael Porter Jr. This is a great debut, and
Stay healthy, kid.
And he's staying out there, but it's a back injury, but all signs point to that he's past that. And I just felt at the time it was worth taking the risk, because what did you inevitably get out of Wendell Carter Jr. his rookie year? He ended up getting hurt anyways. So I felt like
that was the same draft we got Chandler Hutchinson too.
Yeah, I felt like they should have just taken him at 7 and sat him, because at the end of the day, you would have went around and had a worse record, and the next year in the draft, you probably would have had a higher draft pick.
And that's possibly a franchise player too.
Correct. He's 6'9", almost 6'10", and can stroke it. He's literally he looks like a little thicker and maybe a little more fluid Kevin Durant.
And he's terrible on defense. I'll point that out. He's got to get better on defense. But still.
But that's the age we live in. Not everyone is really we said it a couple episodes ago that playing defense isn't exactly the sexiest thing in the world. They're not handing out shoe contracts and endorsements for guys like, oh man, he really locks down these defenders, unless you had like a Norton antivirus commercial and you're like, I wanted a Pat Beverly out there. Yeah.
So the Jazz and Denver had an awesome game yesterday. It went into double overtime. Denver ends up winning 134-132. Jokic has 30 points. He's played
Joker.
He's played strong, man.
Mr. Joker.
He's awesome. And Porter Jr. had 23, another good offensive showing. And like I was saying, they got Jamal Murray back, and he added 23 points. Jamal Murray being back in that lineup adds a whole different level to their game.
Mm-hmm. And what did I always say with the Bulls? Not to deviate back towards that.
No, please.
But they look pretty decent in their backcourt, correct? Their front line, pretty decent. They don't have any wings. Oh my lord, what does Michael Porter Jr. play? He's a wing.
He's a very big wing.
Yes.
At number 4, we have the Houston Rockets. 43-25, and they are 3-1 in the bubble. I.DEAL.
They are playing defense, and I like to see it. You see James Harden out there.
James Harden's playing defense, man. Everyone always wants to rag on James. I've said it. I'm like, James Harden can play defense.
Sometimes, though, defense and just looking at the actual stat of steals is sometimes can be misleading, because a guy can just take a lot of chances and play a lot of passing lanes and play off defenders and jump passing lanes, and sometimes he exposes the player's defensive rotation. But I don't think that's the case in here. His hands have been active. He's certainly moving his feet, and he looks engaged on the defensive end. And I think the Rockets can be a scary, scary team moving forward.
They're scary, but I don't like the idea that they play that small ball lineup. Robert Covington is like the biggest player out there. He's like 6'8". Another hometown kid, Robert Covington. They kicked it off against Dallas, and this was this was a scoring fest. We were talking about how the Rockets were playing defense, not so much in this game. It went into overtime, and the Rockets got the win 153-149. At halftime, the score was 85-75, the Mavericks. At halftime. James Harden ended up scoring 49 points that game. Then they traveled to Milwaukee. They got the win against Giannis and the Bucks, 120-116.
But this is where you talk about, and this is one of the problems that been rising in the bubble, is the simple fact that they're size disadvantage, and that's something to it, but then also it has to be a little bit of want in the dog. You go ahead and beat the Milwaukee Bucks, but you were out rebounded by 26.
Yeah.
That can't continue.
No, and I definitely think the size advantage that teams will have will hurt them. But Westbrook had 31 in that game, and that's what we're seeing a lot in these games, because they went out and played Portland. Harden had 23, Westbrook had 15.
You know, I mean, they were out rebounded against Portland by 23.
I'm sure they were, because we'll talk about Portland in a little bit, but Nurkic is back out there for them. They have Zach Collins. They have Hassan Whiteside. Houston doesn't have a chance on the boards with those guys.
See, my thing, though, is I don't necessarily agree. Like, yes, it's tough sometimes when you have a 6'8" guys out there, but on the defensive end, it's just like a lack of effort and choosing the ball, box out and watch the ball. I've been in games where I've seen this time for another Uncle I.DEAL stories. Pull up a chair.
Listen here, kids.
I've been in the games where I've seen a 6'2", 6'3" guy get boxed out by a 5'6", 5'7" guy, you know?
Yeah, we gotta bring that up again. I was hungover, man. I've already said this on record many times.
Anyways.
So there's been one player for Houston that's really stuck out to me, and this is another one of those young kids that are under the radar, Daniel House.
Oh, I was about to say, please don't tell me another young guy that had ties back to the Bulls and they just let him go.
No, not Daniel House is the guy. He was not tied to the Bulls, but he's continued to be very productive, knocking down open shots or being very opportunistic. He's had games of 20, 16, 17, and 14. And those are really good numbers, especially when you think about the ball-dominant guards that he plays with, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, who always had the ball in their hands. He's really picking up the slack for Eric Gordon, who's injured. So Houston continues to get productive minutes from their bench. We talked about Robert Covington on defense. PJ Tucker's played really good defense and knocked down that corner three. Jeff Green is a name I'll bring up that you probably haven't heard in a minute.
Man, he's still in the league?
Yeah, and he scored 22 against Portland. Austin Rivers is playing good. And Ben McLemore.
Hey.
Ben McLemore was a guy that I really liked coming out of college. Thought he could really shoot the rock well.
You remember what college you went to?
Kansas.
Oh, okay.
Come on, man. You're not going to stump me on that. I just said that I was a big fan of him in college.
That don't mean nothing. You could be fronting.
See? He tried to test my gangster. He saw.
Anywho, this is the real Schwami here. We can go all day, every day.
But no, I'm really happy with Ben McLemore because he seems like he's found a home in Houston. And he's playing extremely well.
You know what? Sometimes leaving Sacramento, where you at, can be helpful.
He's just been bouncing around a team, team to team, and he hasn't really seemed to he hasn't found his stroke in the league yet. But he seemed to really settle in with the Rockets, and he must really like their style of offense because it's really showed that he's been a big part of their bench. Moving on to number 5, and there has been movement because if you remember in our first episode, I was talking about how the Rockets were in the 6th spot, and OKC was in the 5th spot. Utah, OKC, they've been moving up and down. Next up is OKC. They're at number 5, 42-26. They are 2-2 in the bubble. OKC's look good though, I.DEAL. They beat Utah 110-94.
How are they getting this done? Is it all the Chris Paul show? Out there?
It's Chris Paul, it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because I was going to say he had 19 points in that win against Utah. It's been Gallinari who's healthy. He's had a really healthy season and shown how good of a player he could be when healthy and available.
I saw one player, we were watching one of the games, and some dude took it to the rack and dunked it, and I was like, yo, is that Gallinari?
Yeah.
I was like, what?
So they lost to Denver in OT. This is another game that went into overtime, 113-121. Shai Gilgeous again had a really good game, 24 points. And then they go on and beat my Lakers Chris Paul had 21. You know what? They handled the Lakers. I'm not even going to say the score because it's embarrassing. You can go look up the score. I might have already said it when we were talking about the Lakers. And then they lose to the Grizzlies. Paul has 17. But look, I've been really impressed with Lou Dort. He's another under-the-radar player that you might not know about. Have you heard of Lou Dort?
I'm familiar with him. Big time fan of his game.
He plays really tough defense. He can knock down a shot, score some baskets when given the opportunities. He's not someone that defense fears on offense. So he's got to get that into his game a little bit more, that consistent jump shot where teams have to respect it. They've missed their sixth-man, Dennis Schroeder, who his wife had a birth of their child, so he decided to leave the bubble, obviously, for that reason. But I like OKC. I don't think they're going to, if they end up staying in the 5th spot and they have to play the Rockets, no, I don't think that fares well for them.
I want to just say Billy Donovan has done an excellent job coaching this team this year. You figure after 1 year removed from getting rid of 2 of your better players to find yourself sitting comfortably in the 5th position, in the middle. You're right in the middle of the playoff run. So hats off to Billy Donovan. I think he's done an incredible job this year with the Oklahoma City Thunder.
And the NBA coaches voted for him and Mike Budenholzer as coach of the year. Mike Budenholzer is the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, for those who don't know. Number 6, we have the Utah Jazz. And I like the Jazz ideal, but they're 2-4 in the bubble with an overall record of 43-27. They beat the Pelicans. Jordan Clarkson had 23 off the bench. They lost to OKC 110-94. OKC is beating the brakes off some of these teams. They're scary. Mitchell only had 13 points. And I'm telling you, Mitchell only had 13 points because he was the leading scorer of the Jazz. So if your leading scorer only has 13 points, you didn't have a very good offensive night.
We were in the studio the other day watching it. And Donovan Mitchell, for as highly valued as he is, and they put him up there as one of the game's better players.
He's had a mixed bag of results because he had that 13-point game. He bounces back against the Lakers and puts up 33. And then yesterday against the Nuggets in the double OT, he had 35 points. The point you're trying to make is that he can't have 13 points if he's supposed to be the spearhead of that offensive attack.
I just feel like he's one of those guys that maybe just capitalized off of a lot of highlight reel plays that we might have seen on ESPN, and his stature and status in the league has been a little over exaggerated, to say the least.
I think he's very good. From the times I get to watch him play, he's usually attacking the basket very well.
Is he leading your team to an NBA championship?
No, he's not. Mike Conley Jr. is playing really well. Rudy Gobert is a double-double machine. Ingles is knocking down shots, which is always good for the Jazz.
The most unathletic-looking man in the league.
He had 25 against the Grizzlies in the win, 124-115. And Jordan Clarkson, like we were talking about, he's putting up big numbers off the bench. That's what Jordan Clarkson does. Don't expect him to play defense. He's going out there to shoot the rock, not pass it, just shoot. Number 7, we got the Dallas Mavericks. 42-30 overall with a 2-3 record in the bubble.
I don't even care about none of their record or anything.
You just like the stats.
The Luka Doncic show. I'm here for all of that.
He's just putting up insane stats, bro. He had a game against the Sacramento Kings where they won 114-110 in overtime. 34 points, 20 assists, 12 rebounds. Then, yesterday against the Bucks, Doncic posts 36 points, 14 rebounds, and 19 assists. Ridiculous numbers. The other guy we need to talk about. Oh, and I didn't mention that Doncic had 40 against Phoenix. They lost against Devin Booker and the Surging Suns, but he put up 40. So the numbers he's putting up is ridiculous. But the other guy, his running mate, Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis is averaging like 30 points and 10 rebounds in this bubble.
Let me give you this quote that came from Kawhi Leonard, talking about the challenge of guarding Doncic after the game. It's a guy that you have to game plan around. I mean, you see it tonight, how he constantly put pressure on us. But I think this team, we have so many defenders, we got so many guys. It's just tough over a full game where you have to go through defender after defender.
He's really shifty and crafty because he's not the quickest guy in the league, but he uses change of speed really well. and he uses his size.
He has an incredible feel for the game. It's natural to him. Comes very easily.
So while we're talking about Doncic, I wanted to point out something that a lot of people might not know because they get enamored with that step back three when it goes in. He's not a very efficient three-point shooter. So if I'm game planning against Luka, I'm going to have to give him that three. I'm going to have to play off him a little bit because his strength is when he's creating his own shot or he's taking the ball to the basket. He finishes 75% of the times that he goes to the basket. That's his strength. Kristaps, he's scoring in the 20s or the 30s. He's grabbing a lot of rebounds. Hardaway Jr. shooting the ball really well. Seth Curry was playing well. He had a little bit of an injury, so that kind of derailed him. Trey Burke took his minutes, and Trey Burke actually played well one game against the Rockets. He scored 31 off the bench. Finney Smith is playing good minutes, and so is Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber is actually a very good defender for a big man.
That last game that they had yesterday against the Mavericks, Giannis had some really high praise for Luka as well. Talented, really talented. One of the most talented guys I've ever played against. I think he's probably had the most incredible growth from rookie season to sophomore season, and it's not like his rookie season was a dud or anything. He's just continued to ascend to, I think, one of the most exciting players and one of the better players overall in the NBA. And I'm just excited to watch that between the legs assist that he had.
And that was in overtime too.
Man.
Did you see when he crossed over Wesley Matthews and
shook him out of his shoes?
Shook him.
Boy, that looked like 95, 96 ideal out there.
So you keep that young core together. I think they need to add one more star or stud at least. I don't think Hardaway Jr. can be your third man on a championship squad. You add one more player, they're going to make a lot of noise for the next few years. At number 8 spot, you got the Grizzlies, 33 and 37. They are 1-4 in the bubble. Teams seem to just be beating up on them.
Well, somebody's got to get into the playoffs, and I guess the Grizzlies are doing their best attempt to let someone else do it, but we'll see.
So they lost Jaren Jackson Jr.
That's tough. Torn meniscus.
He had 33 points and 22 points before he got hurt. Durant's posted some good numbers. Dylan Brooks has played really well. That's another player who I think's under the radar. A young guy that you guys should be watching. He's only been in the league a couple years. He's a very good player, but with Jaren Jackson out for the season, the Grizzlies don't have a shot of beating Portland in that playing game. That's what it's gonna come down to.
Get him out of here. Been a great run. Your rookie season, Mr. John Morant. Hit the lab, come back, bigger, better, stronger next year.
So while we're talking about Portland, Trailblazers are right on the Grizzlies' heels, and they're going to be playing that playing game. They're going to have to probably win 2 games to win that series because that's the way the playing game works. Whoever's in the 8th spot, they only have to win 1 game. I don't see the Grizzlies beating Portland.
I always wondered why this saying is like, oh, we had them on their heels or we're right on their heels. I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't have wore heels out onto a basketball court.
So the Portland Trailblazers, they beat the Grizzlies 140 to 135 in OT to start this restart out. McCollum has 33 points. Then they lose to the Celtics. Nurkic has 30 points. And that's another key for Portland, having Nurkic back. He just does so much for them. Offensively, defensively, rebounding,
assisting.
He's just an incredible player. I really wish the Bulls had not traded.
Come on, man.
McDermott, and the Nuggets ended up drafting Nurkic and Gary Harris.
You know how many players are in the league that had ties to the Bulls that are just killing it right now? Heck, even a coach in Toronto. Oh, man.
Poor us. It's hard being a Bulls fan.
Nerd!
So we already talked about what happened yesterday between the Clippers and Portland, so I don't need to rehash that. Like I was saying, though, they're fighting for that 8th spot. Damon CJ has played great. Carmelo Anthony has proven that he belongs in the league. He is posting up good offensive numbers and playing defense when it's called for.
And I think that Skinny Mello is something that was a long time coming, and I think sometimes maybe you just need to get humbled a little bit. Maybe this is an instance where it was, and he's put a little bit, dedicated himself more to his craft. Mike D'Antoni had always said, like, yo, Melo could lead the league in assists if he wanted to. Melo can play defense if he wants to.
It's all about want with Melo.
Well, yeah, and maybe he's got that fire lit in him now, and I would like to see a really invested Melo on the defensive end go against your king.
Plenty of people said Melo could be a really good defender if he wanted to.
And I think he could give LeBron some fits if they end up matching up in the playoffs. I don't know. He's not going to completely stop him, but he would be a player that you can rotate onto him. Just given the size of Melo, he's someone that physically can match up with LeBron. And that'll be interesting to see maybe in the playoffs. I
think Melo's going to have to match up against LeBron with the way that
lineup rolls. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see. It remains to be seen.
The player that sticks out for me other than Nurkic, which I'm not really surprised by Nurkic, but I am surprised by the way that Gary Trent Jr. has played. He's had multiple games of 20 points. He's the X factor. I feel like him and Nurkic are the two X factors. If I can have two, I pick two.
I mean,
he's definitely on my list of players you guys need to watch that are under the radar, because I didn't know who Gary Trent Jr. really was until I started watching him.
You, Mr. Basketball?
Hey, unfortunately, I don't get to watch basketball all day like Adrian Wojnarowski.
Oh, would you stop with your sad stories?
I wish.
Oh, somebody please think of the children.
What kind of an example are we setting?
Oh, he gets to stay at home and watch it all day.
Look, if I could just make music and watch basketball all day, that would be the dream life.
Oh my God, you sound like so many other crying ass rappers. Look, you got a job, you got to get paid. You're a man. Get up and go to work. Jesus Christ.
Someone please pay me to talk about basketball, please. So moving on. Moving on, we got to talk about the team that everybody is talking about as far as the bubble goes. It's the undefeated in the bubble Phoenix Suns.
Hey.
The Suns are on fire. Devin Booker has been an MVP candidate of the bubble so far. They have gotten very good play from DeAndre Ayton, their number 1 overall pick, big man. Cameron Johnson. Cameron Johnson is a name that I really didn't know either.
Big time Cameron Johnson fan.
He's lying. He don't know who Cameron Johnson is.
Excuse me?
No, maybe he does. He is the Schwami. But Cameron Johnson is another young player that made my list of young players that you guys need to be watching. He's played really well. Ricky Rubio has run that offense really well. He's been able to find Devin Booker in spots where it's basically an easy, comfortable shot for Devin Booker. And Devin Booker's definitely capitalized off playing with Ricky Rubio. And against the Clippers, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, Devin Booker knocked down a game-winning shot. That I will never forget.
This dude is only 23 years old, and I feel like he's been in the league 10 years.
But he hasn't. And he's only getting better. The Phoenix Suns are going to be, I'm going to say right now, in the 7th or 6th seed next season. With a little bit of growth, I feel like the Phoenix Suns are on their way.
Yeah, going back to Johnson, that there was a lot of talk from Phoenix that they needed to find their power forward of the future. And if you remember Cam Johnson from which college, Michael?
Played in North Carolina.
Ooh, good pull. No, North Carolina. He's developed into a pretty good power forward, I think, for them. Moving forward. First four
good numbers.
Yeah, through the first 4 games in the bubble, he was averaging 13.2 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 2.7 assists on 33.3% shooting from 3-point range. He's also shooting 39% from 3 for the season.
He's definitely made an impact. And the fun thing about this bubble is how tight of a race it is at the back end of the Western Conference. We've already talked about the Phoenix Suns, the Trailblazers. Next, we'll talk about the San Antonio Spurs, who are 30-38 and 3-2 in the bubble.
Get him out of here. They ain't doing that.
They're right there with Phoenix, though. They're 1 game behind Phoenix. DeMar DeRozan's playing really well. DeJounte Murray. Rudy Gay's giving them minutes off the bench, real good, productive minutes. Derek White. They have a nice young core. And I didn't even mention Jakob Poeltl because his name's hard for me to say.
Loved him. Do you remember what college he came out of?
Nope. I do not know where Jakob Poeltl played.
Oh, I happen to do because I watched him in the NCAA tournament. Played at Utah.
Utah.
Schwami.
Lonnie Walker. Lonnie Walker's another good player. They have a lot of nice young pieces. We're gonna
Remember
see
where Lonnie Walker played? No.
for all those.
We're not doing this.
I don't pay that much attention to college basketball. I'm gonna be honest. Until March Madness, I'm not really paying attention to college.
Why is that?
Because I enjoy the professional players, the NBA basketball.
You don't like your workers not getting paid?
Yeah, I don't like the NCAA at all. I feel like these kids should be able to get paid for their autograph. This is another topic for another time, but I'm not a fan of the NCAA in any regards.
Well, I remember where Lonnie Walker played. It was the University of Miami.
Thank you, I.DEAL. I'm glad you could add that to this show.
Well, I mean, one of us does their research before they even become professionals.
I wish I would have put that in this plethora of notes I have. Shame on me.
He's got a database. You should see how he prepares for this thing.
Nerd!
We're already like 40 minutes in and we're only still on the Western Conference.
I do my work for you guys. I hope you enjoy it.
Nerd!
Then we got the New Orleans Pelicans.
Mm-hmm.
What a disappointing team this has been in the bubble. 30-39 overall, 2-3 in the bubble. Lost to the Jazz, lost to the Clippers, beat the Grizzlies, lost to the Kings, beat the Wizards. You know what? At least we've got to see Zion Williamson play ball. And he hasn't gotten that much time. I think the most he's gotten is like 24 minutes. He hasn't played over 30 minutes at all. He's gotten close to 30 minutes. But he's almost averaging a point for every minute he's played in those games. Alonso Ball, I don't know what happened to my homie Alonso Ball.
I thought you were going to ball like Lonzo.
Ever since I wrote that lyric, I've already posted on my Facebook his last 5 games before the NBA shutdown. He's averaging like 26, 25, 12, 16. I'm going off. You got the numbers in front of you?
No.
Oh, no! You rotten bums! You overpaid Winnie! Vile thing! You make my butt sting! I detest you! You're all garbage! All of you! Back up the truck! Back it up!
That's your dumpster fire.
He's shooting 10 for 33. It's just they're getting good minutes from JJ Redick. Brandon Ingram's putting up points.
Yeah, and before we move on from the Pelicans, this message for them comes from 6ix9ine.
Sit down. King's home. It's over. It's over.
And last on this list is the Sacramento Kings, 29-40, 1-4 in the bubble. You know what? I'm not even going to really talk about Sacramento.
You don't have to.
There's no point.
There's none really. But that was the Western Conference. You're listening to the All Net Podcast with myself, I.DEAL, along with MIC LOGIK. We also have our producer, DNA BEATZ, and we just want to give a shout out to him as well. And then also our sponsor.
Malcolm X Pictures, Aztec Dinero. Thank you. We'll be right back. We'll talk about the Eastern Conference. Don't go anywhere. This is the All Net Podcast.
Cheer. Hey, welcome back. Y'all listening to the All Net Podcast. This is I.DEAL, joined alongside with my homie MIC LOGIK. Want to give a shout out to our producer in the spotlight this week, DNA BEATZ, and as well remind y'all that this is brought to you in sponsorship this episode with
Malcolm X Pictures.
Yes. Make sure you go hit up Prime and see that movie.
Shake Bag in the 6.
Yeah, make sure you tell them where you heard it, man. It's your boys over here at the All Net. You already know what it is. Brought to you in sponsorship with true Chicago sports fans and the good fine folks over at Shy Native Entertainment.
Shy Native, baby.
All right, so now you ready to talk about the Eastern Conference?
Hey, let's get it.
The Milwaukee Bucks, 55-15, 2-3 in the bubble. They clinched the number 1 seed. They're pretty much just coasting in there. Giannis continues to put up ridiculously big numbers.
MVP numbers?
MVP numbers.
Well, at least one of our MVPs.
Like I said, I'm not gonna be mad if Giannis is the MVP. They're getting great production from Brook Lopez.
I already saw you writing your list of people you were going to write to in the NBA if LeBron doesn't get another MVP. You had a hit list going on. I saw him. You should have seen it. He posted it up in his locker on the All Net Podcast before he got dressed for the show.
So, like I was saying, Brook Lopez giving good production. Chris Middleton's knocking down shots. Eric Bledsoe's playing well. If they get contributions from Pat Connaughton and Dante Vincenzo, what's his name?
Hey, Vincenzo eating fettuccine at Vincenzo's. Oh,
But the Milwaukee Bucks are fine right now. I'm not worried about the Milwaukee Bucks. Toronto Raptors are the number 2 seed. And I.DEAL, this is my dark horse to win the championship.
How are they doing this when they just got rid of their best player?
They don't have a superstar either.
Yo, I was hearing something the other day that, Fred Van Fleet is going to get paid.
He's going to get paid. Played in Rockford.
He did, and then he went to Wichita State.
Wichita State, yes.
Yeah, it was the same year where Wichita State and VCU were both making noise in the NCAA tournament. So
that's the first time I actually found out about Fred Van Fleet. But he's actually playing really well. He had a game against the Heat where he scored 36. Lowry scored 33 against the Lakers.
Lowry.
Like we were talking about, they put a bashing on the Lakers. And here's the thing I'm noticing. I'll write down the scores and the wins and the losses. I'm not seeing Pascal Siakam as a leading scorer in any of these games. And that's concerning for me because that's who I tab to be their star who's going to have to get him a bucket at the end of the game. Because Lowry and Fred Van Fleet, they're like 6-foot guards. You put a tall guard on them, you put someone with some size on them, they're going to have trouble. So you're going to need Pascal Siakam to really come through. We're going to find out just how good Pascal Siakam is. Next we have the number 3 seed, the Boston Celtics, 46-23, 3-2 in the bubble. Now they came out against the Milwaukee Bucks and they lost 119-112. Jason Tatum had 5 points.
That's unacceptable for somebody who
is touted as one of the up-and-coming stars of the league. So then he came back against the Trailblazers, had like 34. Then they lost against Miami Heat. Miami Heat with no Jimmy Butler, 106-112. I don't understand why Boston does this. Why they have these lapses where they play bad basketball. And I know Kemba Walker, he's been dealing with a sore knee. And they were asking him about his knee, and he says his knee's okay. He hasn't eclipsed 20 points in any of these games in the bubble yet, and that's what he averages for the season. So they need Kemba to play really well. They need Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Gordon Hayward to all have big minutes and big point production. But they don't have a big man. And that's the thing that's really frustrating about the Boston Celtics. Daniel Theis, he's a good player. He's a guy. Enes Kanter will give him okay minutes off the bench, but they don't have a big man, and I think that's where they're going to struggle once again, just like I feel like the Rockets will. But the Rockets are going to score more points than the Boston Celtics, so I feel like the Rockets are okay in that sense in comparison to the Boston Celtics.
I just don't think Boston has enough firepower.
They don't wow me.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to be a serious threat coming out of the East.
So the Miami Heat are the number 4 seed. The number 4 seed, 43-27 with a bubble record of 2-3. This is a team I like a lot. They haven't had a really good showcase in the bubble so far. They beat the Nuggets first game, 125-105. Then they lose to the Raptors. Then they beat the Celtics. Then they lose to Milwaukee. Duncan Robinson had 21 that game. They lost to the Suns. Hero goes off for 25. The reason I bring those guys' names up because they're part of the young core. Duncan Robinson was undrafted. He's also one of the best shooters in the league right now. Tyler Herro's your boy. You know where he played college at?
Kentucky.
Of course he did. Bam Adebayo continues to play really well. And I feel like Bam was really giving the Celtics a big problem. Like they had no answer for Bam Adebayo. And that goes back to talking about the Celtics' lack of a big man. He's missed a couple games. He's got some kind of lower leg injury.
The local kid, Kendrick Nunn, I think he's left the bubble.
He left the bubble. He was playing pretty good. He had to leave the bubble for personal reasons, not COVID related. So he's going to have to quarantine when he gets back. And it hasn't been said how many days he'll have to quarantine for before he can return to action. I thought Andre Iguodala's been giving them really good minutes. I like the Miami Heat. If they end up playing the Indiana Pacers, who we're about to talk about, I feel like Miami's going to win this.
I feel like Miami could be one of those a la kin to your Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
One of those dark horses that could come out of the East. I think they have enough mixture of offensive players and young guys and players that are invested on the defensive end to where they could be a threat in the East.
Yeah. And I think Goran Dragic got hurt. I'm not sure how many games he's going to miss. That's a big part of their bench. Number 5 is the Indiana Pacers. 43-27. They are 3-1 in the bubble, and they have what I would like to believe is the MVP of the bubble so far, TJ Warren. TJ Warren was averaging in his first 3 games in an insane 39.6 points per game. He had 5 games of 30 plus this season before he entered the bubble. So TJ Warren, he's been scoring buckets throughout his career. When he was on the Suns, he averaged 19.6 one season. It's hard to imagine why they traded him away just for cash consideration. This is a player who can go out and get you 20 points without a problem. He started out this bubble with a 53-point performance against the 76ers, 34 against the Wizards, 32 against the Magic. He came back to life against the Suns, or he came back down to earth against the Suns. He had 16 in a loss. Everybody's losing to the Suns. And then he plays LeBron and the Lakers.
He went 15 for 22 from the floor and was 5 of 8 from three-point range to lead the Pacers to a 116-111 over Michael's presumed MVP, LeBron James, and his Los Angeles Lakers.
He's playing out of his mind. He is shooting over 50% from the 3 and from the field. TJ Warren is definitely my MVP for the bubble. They got Malcolm Brogdon, who's playing really well, Miles Turner, Aaron Holiday, Victor Oladipo. Glad he decided to play. He's playing pretty good. They're missing their all-star Domantas Sabonis as well as guard Jeremy Lamb. That's a starter for them, and Jeremy Lamb's a nice piece off the bench for them. It's going to be fun watching Miami versus the Pacers, but like I said, I think Miami's going to win it.
A little hot TJ Warren news for you over that stretch where he scored 53 against the Sixers and then 34 and 32 against the Wizards and Magic. That was a combined 119 points, which tied a team record for a 3-game stretch. So he is balling
out of his mind. Number 6, I.DEAL. I don't like this team. I don't like this team at all. Philadelphia 76ers.
Trash.
42-27 overall with a 3-1 bubble record. So they have a good bubble record, but I don't believe in this team at all.
You don't trust the process?
I don't. The process is overrated, and it needs to come to an end. The Ben Simmons needs to be traded. And speaking of Ben Simmons, unfortunately, he suffered an injury to his left knee. I think it's a dislocated kneecap. He's going to, which will require surgery. But look, this is what I don't understand about Joel Embiid. He is the most dominant big man in the league when he wants to be. When he settles for outside jumpers and 3-point shots, he's just letting the other team off the hook. Because if he wanted to dominate in the post, he could easily average 35 points per game, in my opinion, because there's nobody that can stop him. And it makes me wonder why he decides to settle for those outside jumpers all the time. Is it because big men want to be guards?
Sometimes, I mean, speaking from a man who's played out on the 3-point line as well as the post, I know this is going to be foreign news to you, Michael, because you spend most of your time out on the perimeter.
True.
It's a little bit more work to get a shot, to get position in the post. Takes a little hombre with huevos, a little bidat.
But he's bigger than everybody.
Yeah, but...
And nobody can stop him. So he started out this restart against the Pacers, where they lost, but he put up 41 points. Then he goes out against the Spurs, and they get a win, 27 points. And they beat the Wizards, who everybody else is beating as well, 30 points. I don't get it. This is why I say they need to trade away Ben Simmons. Because they need outside shooters. You need to space the floor for Joel Embiid to go do work in the post. But when you have Ben Simmons on your squad, you can definitely, you're not gonna have to worry about him shooting a 3-point shot. So you can lay off him a little bit and you can go help double down in the post. That's what Philadelphia needs to do, in my opinion. Tobias Harris, he can shoot the 3 a little bit. He can definitely score the ball. But they need some more outside shooting. They can't just rely on Korkmaz, I think his name is.
Gesundheit.
Moving on, number 7, the Brooklyn Nets. We're pretty much at the point where we can stop talking about these teams, but
yeah, they ain't gonna do nothing.
I'll do them the service. They're 33-36, 3-2 in the bubble. They've actually played really well. They've been entertaining. They beat the Bucks 119-116. The betting odds were plus 19, which is the largest upset since 1993. And they've had a player who I think has been under the radar on most people's radar, Timothy Cabarrot. Does that name sound familiar to you?
Yes, because he has ties to a certain organization in which I was a big fan of, unfortunately.
The the Chicago Bulls.
Yes.
I knew it when I saw him in a couple games for the Bulls. This kid could play. He's playing for the Brooklyn Nets right now, and he's out there balling. So when the Nets actually get healthy next year, they get KD back, they get Kyrie, they get DeAndre Jordan, everybody up to speed. They already have a nice young core. You add those 3 studs into the lineup, the Nets are going to be a problem next year. And last, we got the Orlando Magic in the number 8 seed. They are 32-38 with a 2-3 bubble record. I mean, there's not much to say about them. They have Fournier, Ross, Vucevic, Fultz, Aaron Gordon. They're going to be in NBA hell for a while because they're good enough to make the playoffs, but they're not going to break that back end.
Best thing for them to do would be to just go ahead and disappear from the playoff race.
Oh, and the Washington Wizards are there as well. Does anybody care?
Nah.
24, 45, 0-5. I do like, and these are players on my radar too that should be on yours as well. Rui Hashimura.
Yeah.
Thomas Bryant's been doing work.
You remember where he was from? Hashimura?
Gonzaga.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, Thomas Bryant, I do not know, but he's been balling, as well as Troy Brown. No Beal, no Wall, no Bertans. Thank you for playing Washington. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in these next coming weeks. Well, definitely in these next few games, because we're going to see where the standings end up, because there's only a couple more games before the playoffs actually start. So there's not going to be too much more movement. I'm really excited to watch the back end of the Western Conference race. It's going to be Portland, though, and the Grizzlies have that playing game, and Portland's going to win. That's my prediction. And that's going to do it for the Eastern Conference, as well as the 5th episode of the All Net Podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Michael.
Oh, I love talking basketball. I've been making notes all week. It's been a lot of fun.
He has. I think he had to buy a second laptop just to get all his notes in.
Got to thank our sponsor, Malcolm X Pictures. Shout out Aztec De Niro. Follow him on IG at Aztec De Niro. And thank you once again to DNA BEATZ for providing the landscape through which we took a journey in.
Yes, the soundscape.
The soundscape. That's a better way to put it. So, thank you to all you listening out there. We really appreciate it. From I.DEAL, myself. Check us out next time. The All Net Podcast, MIC LOGIK and I.DEAL. Episode 5 is a wrap. Swish.